Hello and welcome to the Creative Mindset Podcast with Erin Vasquez, Master Certified NLP Coach and Hypnotherapist. And today I am so happy to be joined by Colin Stranahan. Colin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. And Colin, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I am a drummer and musician, composer, educator, resident of Brooklyn, creative person. And I always say this, but it's amazing to say that I'm a musician full time. I'm lucky enough to be living and breathing, eating, sleeping off of my art, which is a really wild thing, and it's awesome. So that's what I do.
So how long have you been a full-time musician?
I guess I've been full time since I guess I was 18. I started gigging. I had one job before I started playing music full time, so I guess it was around 18. I started gigging and sort of making money playing music. Since then, I've kind of, every year it's become more and more busy, which is great. So I guess now I'm 31, so it's been a long time. I went to school for a few years, but I kind of throughout all of that time, I was basically supporting my life through music. So it feels like a very long time. Yeah.
How long have you known that was what you wanted to do with your life? Or I guess I'm just assuming that you did know that that's what you want to do with your life.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I've been playing music since I was a kid, since really I was like 3 or 4 years old, and I started studying when I was 8. And there was a really interesting, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but there was a really interesting point in my life where I was in middle school and I was playing football. I was playing American football.
Huh.
And I was really good at it. I was really good. And throughout this time period, I was playing music. I was playing drums, and I had really just never really thought about it. I thought to myself, like, oh, I want to play the drums. I want to do this. I want to play music. And I had very supportive parents. But there was this football thing, and there were some other people really encouraging me to do it. And it even went as far as like I was about to be in high school, and there were some people from different schools in Colorado trying to recruit me and go to school for football. And I was playing a game, and I injured somebody very badly. And it was actually at that moment when I was like, no, I can't do this. I don't want to. I remember saying to myself, and it's kind of funny, but I was like, it's so true. I was like, I don't want to hurt people. I want to help people. And I thought,
wow,
through music, I could help people, and I could help myself and live like a very honest life. And the football thing just I just left it from that moment on, and like went home and never sort of looked back and just pursued music. So I haven't really talked about that period of my life that much, but that's kind of the honest truth. I was like, I guess, going into high school, and that's when I kind of decided. So
that's really interesting because both careers, both sports and music, carry with it a certain amount of risk and a certain amount of competition. And it's really interesting that
absolutely.
people were recruiting you for football. We went to a high school where there were no athletics, but but having gone to a conventional high school for a couple of years before I ended up at DSA, I remember that football was like the thing. It was like the popular thing. So was there any part of you said that you never looked back, but was there any part of you that felt conflicted at the time, or was it one of those like, moments of clarity that you're like, nah, it's going to be something else?
That's interesting. It's weird. From that moment, I just really never thought about that. I mean, I'll be completely honest. There's been sort of interesting thoughts later in my life now where I think back and go, I wonder if I would have gone that way. And, looking at people in the NFL now, like, it's crazy how much money these people make. And
Uh-huh.
money is not, I mean, money is something we all need to live, but it's not
Right.
really important to me. And it's not something that I regret doing. But I will say that, honestly, there were times where I'm like, I wonder if I had gone down that path and done it. But honestly, yeah, it was just at that point where it just, to me, through doing it, it always, we spoke about something earlier where you were saying something about practicing instruments, and how that
Mm-hmm.
sort of, like, practicing sort of feels like a chore. I felt like football was sort of a chore to me.
Mm.
And it felt like I was doing it for somebody else other than myself. Whereas music was something that really, it's interesting because I really didn't think about it that much because it was just something that was a part of me. And that's it's really amazing. And I'm so grateful to have supportive people in my life with music, and my family, my sister, like, everybody was very supportive early on. So it wasn't really something I ever thought of as like an curricular activity, or something that I was
Mm-hmm.
doing. Music was just what I could define myself through. And it was like some of the first really deep experiences, spiritually and just in my life were through music. So it always felt like it was just a part of me. So when I made that decision, yeah, I I just felt like it was a natural thing to do, and I just never really looked back on sports, and I'm really glad that I didn't do that. So, um,
I'd say you made the
yeah.
right choice. What do you come up with it like
Thank
when
you.
your mind does wander? What do you come up with? Like, if you when you wander and say, like, I wonder what would have happened if I went the football route. What happens in that little thought exercise?
It's funny because I'd like to say I have a good personality about it. So it's very daydream kind of stuff. I just kind of, like, in my mind, really picture myself. It's a visual thing. Like, I see the number on the jersey and my last name, and, like, I don't know. I just see myself in that situation, and I can just see myself, like, driving a car that's really nice and having all this money, and really
Mm-hmm.
thinking about that, and maybe having some sort of, I don't know, maybe I'd be married if I play football. But then I kind of think about it and I start laughing because it's so not me. It's just not
No.
who I am. But in those moments, yeah, I mean, man, it's crazy. I mean, football players make so much money. It's insane. People that play sports, and then I get into that whole thing where I get really upset because it's like artists and teachers and all these people, like, we're all struggling out here, and people that run around and hit each other and throw balls around, like, make millions of dollars per year. So it's an interesting thing. I have a good personality about it, and I laugh about it, and it's silly. And then I get really angry because I'm like, man, there's that side of it. Those, maybe they struggle in other ways, but who knows?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
yeah,
I know, like, I don't know if you've ever watched, like, the Sports Center. I forget what those little documentaries are, but they love sensationalizing, like, some of those people go broke pretty dang quick, you know?
right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I'm
Yeah,
curious, like, kind of going back to the advent of your music career. You've mentioned several times now that you had a lot of support around you, and I'm just
yeah.
curious, how did that support show up for you?
Mm. Well, um, it was interesting because both of my grandfathers played drums, so the actual
Oh,
instrument
wow.
was just like, um, there were toys and there were the drums, and it's like whenever I look back to pictures of myself when I was, really young, it's just like me sitting at a drum kit with my grandfather, or, you know, drumsticks or a cymbal, or it's interesting. So I think that early on, my father being a jazz musician, what was so amazing about the support and how I felt it was that, I just had this general curiosity about music. I was drawn to it, and I remember really being encouraged, like when I was younger, like, oh yeah, this is Miles Davis, or this is John Coltrane, and here's some records, and you should check it out. But there
Mm-hmm.
was never any pressure about it. It wasn't like, you should learn how to do this. You should learn how to play the saxophone. You should learn, you should follow your grandfathers around and really learn what they're doing. It was just such an open, inviting environment to me. And, my sister was very creative with music early on in her life. And, you know, I try to give her a lot of credit because she really introduced me to a lot of different kinds of music. And she always teases me about that now. She's like, I'm the one that showed you all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I honor that, because she's like, well, I hear you listing different bands all the time, and you don't remember when you were this age. Like, I was the one that showed you all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah. So, that's what I really think about. Is it was just always such a natural part of the family dynamic, and music was always there, and things were discussed, and if I had questions about music, I always could find an answer to them, whether it was something I wanted to know about and was really curious about, or it was kind of an interesting cosmic thing where I'd be thinking about it and it would come up somehow naturally in my life. And so when I really look back and think about things, there was just that common thread of support, like always. There was never anything negative when it came to music or that lifestyle. Yeah. So I guess that's really how I feel support, at least in the family, inside the family at that time, because some of our earlier experiences are, of course, with family. And
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So when you came home and said, I don't want to do football, I don't want to hurt people, I want to help people, music is it, everyone was like, all right, we're on board.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really
Yeah, it was like,
beautiful.
okay, cool. Yeah, it is. It's really awesome.
That's fantastic. So you're gigging in high school. You go off to college. Did you go to New York for
Mm-hmm.
college? I feel like I should know this.
Oh, it's cool. It's interesting because I really jumped around.
Okay.
First, I went to California. I went to Stockton, California, at the University of Pacific. There was the
Okay.
Dave Brubeck Institute of Jazz.
Oh,
Which,
okay. Oh my
yeah,
gosh, what
I
an
did that for a
unfortunate
year.
location for such a beautiful
Yeah,
artist. Okay.
absolutely. Especially 6 or 7 years ago. I mean, I don't know how Stockton is now, but it was kind of a scary place back in 2006, more than 6 or 7 years ago.
I
10.
unfortunately was there 2 months ago fleeing the Sonoma fires and had to
Oh,
stay at a La
really? Oh,
Quinta
wow.
Inn by myself. No, it sucked. Had to
I
stay at a
probably
La
stayed at that
Quinta
hotel
Inn.
also. Yeah.
It was, I will confirm that it was still a little bit terrifying, but yes, sorry, go
Okay,
ahead.
fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Anyway,
it was crazy. So I did
okay.
that for a year. And then
Okay.
I went to New York. I came here. I went to the new school for a year. And then I got into this other program called the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz, which was in New Orleans. So I went there for 2 years and studied. And then I came back here in 2010, and I've been here ever since.
What
So,
was
yeah.
that transition like going from being at home, kind of gigging in high school? There's a lot of security when we're still at home and everything. And then going out and being an adult and making your own way as a musician. What was that transition like?
Mm. Um, it was really interesting because there were a couple different points of which that happened, and I must say, like
Okay.
the two college programs that I did, especially the Brubeck Institute in California, like that was a very, when I say school program, it was like a very small program. So it was just like 5 people, like a band, and we were at this
Okay.
university, and the whole thing was funded by Clint Eastwood. And we were studying with all these people all the time and working all the time. So it was really seamless at that point, because I have to say, it was like a very, like how I had fantasized, I'm using that word a lot, but how I kind of
That's
dreamed
fine.
of being a musician was happening like that first year, because I was in this sort of very controlled environment. I was getting paid to go to school as a freshman in college, which was kind of crazy. And that was really intense. And I really enjoyed it, and I loved it. But there was always this feeling of like, this doesn't feel like the real deal in a way. Like,
How
and
so?
I'm not sure what that was, because, you know, I say that, of course, now, because looking back, like I didn't worry about anything financially that first year. Like there was never any classes or anything talking about how to really, really support yourself as an artist, how to really look ahead and see, like, you might be busy for a long period of time, but then you're not, like how to take care of those moments. It was a
Mm.
very controlled environment, and I was very young, I was like 18. So there was this interesting um, epiphany I had, where it was like, wait a minute, like, this is all happening. This is amazing. And I was really excited about it. But then I have to say, when I moved to New York for the first time, and started going to school, I was like, wow, for a while, it felt very different. I wasn't performing at all. Like, I was trying to get my bearings on the city, and I was thinking
Mm.
about money in a very honest way. And yeah, it was a crazy um, shift. And then very quickly, like, I got into this other school, which was kind of the same thing, but even more hooked up. Like, they gave us a place to live, and they paid us, we were on like a retainer, and, to be in school and study, which is amazing, because like
Right.
I had worked really hard and I was composing music. So I was put in this situation again where I wasn't really worrying about um, money or paying rent, and it was great. I mean, I think those kind of
Yeah.
things are really important and really amazing for an artist to go through. And then when I moved back to New York, it was at that point, like, I feel so fortunate and lucky to have moved back to the city for the second time, because that first time that I went away, I really had perspective, and I really
Mm.
was practicing and really working very hard. Like, those 2 years I was in New Orleans, like, I really didn't have a social life. I was
Mm.
practicing, like, you hear these stories about artists practicing 8 or 9 hours a day. I did that. I did that for 2 years, and it was, it was really crazy. I'm really glad I did it, and I really got to a new place within my life, and my through my art. But there was this other part of my life that hadn't quite developed yet. Um, and so that was kind of the transition. Like, I kind of got out of school, and I was like, okay, time to go for it. And then I was in this program. Then I got out of that, kind of went for it. And the first time I moved to New York, I really wasn't ready in a lot of ways for certain things.
How
And then
weren't you
being able to
ready?
go,
What weren't you ready for in New York?
I was very young, and I think one thing that I see in younger people now when I meet them, and it's really funny to talk about that, because now I'm 31, and I would like to, I think one would like to think of themselves as young and still growing up and developing, but it's true. I run into people all the time that were like me. I was very excited about music. I still am. I'm very excited to play with people, and New York is crazy because you can go out every night and see all these musicians and people performing that you've been listening to your whole life and that you admire
Yeah.
so much, and you're in the same room with them, and there's only 5 of you, and you're having this conversation. And so at first I wasn't really ready for that, because I just saw it as like, oh, I just was really excited, and I guess I was a little pushy, I guess, at first. Like, I was like, hey, you're so and so, I want to play music with you, let's do it.
Hmm.
So there was a certain etiquette, I guess, um, that I hadn't learned. But I think that that exciting spirit I had, it didn't go away. I think I just learned more about it, and uh, learned more how to sort of communicate with people and sort of create a connection through, just communicating. And I think that was just in a lot of aspects of my life. I was younger and very eager to get out and do it, and thought I knew how to do certain things. And yeah, I just learned as I went. And the second time I moved to the city, I felt really, you know, confident and at peace where I was as an artist. And I think that people really saw that maturity that I didn't have before, or I had developed it in a lot of ways. And it's funny thinking back what I just said. It's like it was just pure excitement and trying to meet people, but it was something more than that. It was like a maturity and an understanding, and I felt like I had more of whatever that was when I moved back. I think it was just becoming an adult and gaining some more perspective, life perspective. Yeah.
So, with the understanding, what do you think you were understanding more of when you went back to New York?
Mm. Well, first of all, as like an artist, as a musician, I felt like I really, like I said before, I got to a different place um, within music and where I was as an artist and a drummer and a composer. I felt like I really dug very deep for 2 years and really got to another place within my music, but also as a person, I developed a lot of just social skills that maybe I didn't have before. Just ways of communicating and talking to people, and uh, you know, really developing an understanding of life in general. Just making genuine connections and really thinking about it, and just really seeing life for what it was. Whereas before I was just really thinking about music all the time, but I think at this point I was just really developed as a person. There were other things that I could talk about with other people, not just artists, that I felt like gave me more of a rounded experience. I felt aware of, where I was financially, and it's hard to say. I think it was just a life experience thing. I was living a very honest life at that point, and I was, really aware of. It's hard to explain. I don't know. It was just a perspective thing. I had gone through a couple of relationships. I had felt the sort of other side of life that I hadn't felt before. The struggle of, like I said, I wasn't performing all the time, and I was really working for a lot of things. I was put in a lot of situations where I really had to prove to myself and prove to the people around me that I was a strong person, a strong musician, and a strong person. I was able to deal with certain things that were presented to me, whether it was like a new artist and some new music that I needed to learn, or a new situation in life where it's like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't quite make enough money for rent this month. How am I going to deal with that? How am I going to make that happen? So I guess it was just life experience. It was just more and more things that were coming up in life that I was like, oh, this is a new experience for me. Kind of broke out of that sort of controlled environment, and I was kind of on my own for the first time. So I really had to get my stuff together, I guess, in a lot of ways.
There's so much there that I just want to like
I
deep
know.
dive into.
Sorry, I
No, please
really
don't
jumped
apologize.
around.
No. Please don't apologize, because there's so much there that I think is really, really valuable.
Mm,
the new situations and the new coping mechanisms, especially in the
mm,
context of a career that isn't necessarily, it's not like you're going to Wall Street. It's not like you're going into
right.
marketing or to business. There's no guarantee of what you're really doing. So we'll just back up one
Yeah.
tick there. So what did you do with that context of not really having a guaranteed paycheck and at the end of the
Mm,
month saying, oh my gosh, I didn't make rent this month? What was that mental process for you, and how did you find the solution?
mm. Well, I think the really important part of that was to realize that I think at that point, when I was really hitting what I would say reality in my life for the first time, I really had to ignore a lot of negative
Hmm.
negative things that were coming up, whether it was talking to certain people saying, "Oh, well, that kind of lifestyle, being a freelance musician in New York City, that just doesn't really happen anymore. It doesn't really work." And
So was that
this
around you a lot?
it was, especially when I first got here. I mean, we're talking like, you know, post 9/11 in New York,
Yeah.
which really messed a lot of people up, a lot of
Yeah.
artists up, and a lot of places got shut down, a lot of clubs, a lot of like laws changed in the city, a lot of like touring musicians' lives sort of changed. Um, I mean, everything changed. It changed everybody. Um, but I really felt like that was really present at the time when I first moved to the city. And so there were a lot of people that I had really admired as a young person, looking up to, that were musicians that I worshipped, that I was just like, this is what I want to do, that were telling me as I was meeting them, like, oh, there's no room for that sort of creative thing anymore. We don't really do that anymore, or that's not really happening. So I really had to build the courage up to ignore that.
So
Like
how did
I
you
had
do
to,
that? Because like uh,
yeah.
there's something in NLP called modeling. Like go out,
Hmm.
see, find someone who's doing what you want to do, and then go do what they're doing. And
Right.
and then there's exactly what you just said. You went to the city where all of your idols are. You grew up listening to them, and now they're telling you that what you went out there to do is not something that's done, and
Mm.
they're someone you've looked up to. How, like, tell me about that mental process. How did you
Right.
create that courage and stay with yourself to just keep going?
Yeah, it was crazy. And it was really discouraging in a lot of ways. And that was kind of
Okay.
the first sort of it was kind of the first time I had dealt with depression in a way, or
Okay.
anxiety or fear. Um,
Hmm.
and I really there was something inside of me at that time. It's still there. I'm saying everything like it's in the past. I'm still living this reality, but like there was from I'm very lucky to have been through these experiences where I was really looked after in a lot of ways, whether it was financial or that time to perform, that time to practice. So when I did come and that was happening, and yeah, it sucked. I mean, I was hearing all this stuff from you know my peers and other people that had already been here for a while, and it was really discouraging. But there was something inside of me that was like, that can't be true. I got to keep going. I got to keep trying this. Like,
Hmm.
sure, maybe these people have been here for a long time, but I just got here, and I just really believed. I had so much faith that what I was doing was the right thing to do and was really honest. And I felt very connected, regardless of hearing all of these negative things. I could still see the the light. I could still see like a way of doing this, a way to make it happen. And so I just I just kept going. I kept trying to go to all the jam sessions in town, and I still kept meeting people, maybe avoiding certain topics to talk about at that point. I was like, well, maybe I should just try to keep it like
Like what?
discussing things creatively, just maybe not talking about like living in the city or certain clubs that had closed down, but maybe keep just avoid certain topics, just avoid talking about money with certain artists, and just, so at the time I really pushed myself. And then, after a few months of just like continuing to do what I was doing and practicing and going out to these jam sessions, I got called to do like my first tour when I was in town, like my first time going to Europe. And I was like, gonna make some good money. And I was playing with some people that like I had always wanted to play with. And it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, I think this is possible.
Great.
So I was lucky that I had so many experiences early on that really carried me through that period. And I'd like to say that I feel like because of that, I proved something to myself, which I really try to encourage young people or other artists that might be struggling, is like, if this is what you do and this is what you really believe, you have to really listen to that spirit. And sure, there's going to be some other things happening and maybe some negative forces, but you really have to push through that if you can, and to just really listen to your intuition and to your spirit, regardless of what's happening. So that was happening, but then I had just got called for this tour, and I was like, okay, so I can do this. I can get through this. I can make this happen, and I'm really excited to do this. This is the first time I was going to Europe, and it was amazing. And I feel like just from that story, from that spirit, like that energy has not left me. Like I've gone through some crazy experiences, but that drive to still just make music is still in me, and it's still very strong, and it still really pushes me through, and it has through some really crazy moments. But I really try to just really stay in touch with that fire that I have, and to just really believe in what I'm doing.
Do you actively work on that? Do you actively work on staying in touch with that fire that you have, or staying connected? Or is that something that's just with you all the time? Because there's a couple of things going on here. You said it like when you left high school, you were living the life that you had visualized in high school. Like you were playing music, you were playing gigs, you believed in yourself when you went back to New York, even though like all of these icons of yours were saying like, no, this isn't something you do. And you went, and all of a sudden you're on a tour with people that you've always wanted to play with. And that was just the first of so many tours for you. Like it's just been onward since then. So I'm wondering, do you actively visualize? Do you actively connect? Or is this just like a gift that you have?
That's a great question. I think a part of it is it's just who I am as a person, and it's just a spirit that it's just within me. It's something that I have, and it's something that I'm able to get in touch with. But the older I get, the more experiences I have. It's something that I really just need to be aware of all the time. And I do actively try to get in touch with it now. I have like hundreds of notebooks that I just write ideas in, and I still do that. I've done that since I was in high school. Okay. But I just find that the more experiences I have, it's not harder to get in touch with it, but it's more important for me to sort of go through something every day where I remind myself of that. Whether it's something visually I'm looking at on a piece of paper, or it's a list that I have going on in my mind, or something that I really want to do. Maybe it's always there. It really is. But
I would say yes. And I'm also curious, why is it more important for you as you have more life experiences to actively connect with it? What's that correlation there?
Well, it's a lot of it's a lot of personal things, I guess, at this point now. Just where I'm at in my life, and yes, a lot of things have really. I've really built a career for myself. Yes, I think I can say that very honestly.
Yes.
It's been successful, but there have definitely been moments where I still doubt what I do, or I still get discouraged. But at the end of the day, who I am as a person, and this the way I live my life, it's just something I have to continue to do. Like, I've been at these points in my life where I'm like, man, can I keep this going? Am I able to continue having this career in music, and can I make this work? And then the question is answered, and it's just like, it doesn't matter. I have to do it. There's nothing else I could do.
What brings up the question in the first place? Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I'm like so
no,
curious.
It's fine. It's great. You're helping me sort of explain this.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's, man, I think it is getting really hard. It's getting a lot harder than even it was when I first moved to town, and people were starting to become very negative about living a life playing music, living in New York City. It's become a lot harder, and I've dealt with the reality of like being younger and being in those programs where I was being paid and really living life in a different way, where I wasn't worrying about certain things financially. But there are I've gone through some heavy breakups in my life. Like, I was going to get married, and I broke up with that person, and my life completely changed. And so I guess what makes things harder now is like the other aspects and the other parts of life are coming up. They're catching up with me as an artist. I feel like I've always been great at living my life as an artist and sort of feeding my creative energy, being really honest with it, putting that first in my life, being really aware of that, loving it, willing to die for my art, willing to die for music, and knowing that, and just putting every ounce of energy I have in my life into my art. But there are other parts of life that are catching up to that. I mean, whether I try to ignore this, and I have for many years, like, we have to make money. You have to have money in your bank account. You have to be able to feed yourself, pay rent, be able to attend to family emergencies. Like, somebody passes away in your family, you should probably be there if you can. And that's hard to do when you don't have any money. Or, if you want to live a well-rounded life, you have to make time for your relationships or be there in those other ways. And I guess what becomes harder and harder as the older I get is those other parts of life are more and more of a reality. And I don't think it's a bad thing that and I'm not saying I put music before everything. I didn't love somebody. I wasn't a good family member. I wasn't a good boyfriend. I was all of those things, but right. I'm very serious about what I do, and I live for it. So it's hard to shift to other things sometimes, and the other energy. And I wasn't very good at those other things because I didn't ever worry about, you have to make this amount of money a month, or you have to pay these bills, you have to pay taxes. Like, what are taxes? What does that mean? All these things in life. It's so silly to say that out loud now because
no, I'm 36 and I'm still like, what is this? This seems so arbitrary and nebulous, and I'm not on board, but I also hate those letters. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what makes it harder, is like the reality of everyday life is catching up to me. And I have to also say, like, I live in one of the most expensive cities in the world. It's not easy to do that. It's not like, I used to think that it really didn't matter. Like, and a lot of me still doesn't think it does. Like, I live my life a certain way, and it's to be able to make music and to be at the top of my game all the time, and to always make sure that all of that stuff is, I never slack in those areas. But
Right.
I've come to realize now that you have to do that with everything in your life. You really have to be aware of all that stuff. So I guess that's where it comes from.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that's what causes the questions, and then
yeah,
the answer always comes back to you resoundingly. You have to make this work,
yeah,
right? Okay.
right,
So when that's the answer and it comes back, you have to make this work. That's definitely a certain kind of answer, but like when you get that answer back from yourself and you're still super connected to your purpose and really clear on what you're trying to do, like, are there
hmm,
action steps that you actually take to move out of that questioning phase and into that knowing state, or what happens
yeah,
next after that?
totally. I feel like when I'm in those moments, or when I'm experiencing doubt, or I'm experiencing frustration, or something's happening, um, I just have to remind myself to really focus. And what I do is I put on like my favorite album, or an album that I really makes me happy. Like I have to find happiness in that moment. Um, and there are a few things I can do. One of them is just like sit down and play the drums, like just play. And that always gets me back to this sort of space in my mind and in my body where I just feel really connected. And it's like I
Mm,
feel really happy. I feel like I'm connected with my life again.
yeah.
Um, it's also in more experiences now, like the more stuff I write down, the more notebooks I have of thoughts, the more I go back, the more I sort of get back in thinking about like I write everything down, like whether it's a musical idea, whether it's something I'm thinking about in my life that I want to change, um, or goals that I have. I just write everything down. So even just looking at a couple pages of random things, it just kind of triggers me back to a thought I had, and I sort of kind of lose myself in the music again. Um,
Mm.
so I guess it just kind of gets me back into that moment, um, and I really feel it, and it's like a motivational thing, and it's true. Like I really strongly feel that way. Like you know, I know that I really have. There are certain sacrifices I've made in my life to be where I'm at. But I think the most important thing that I remember in that moment is like I have this. I've gone to therapists. I've talked to certain people before, and talked to people I'm in relationships with, friends, family. Like I have to really ignore or um, let go of like all of those things in my life in those moments where there's doubt, or people are saying to me like, oh man, being an artist, being a musician is just like not a realistic lifestyle anymore. Like I
Mm.
don't agree with that at all at this point in time. Whether I have $6 in my bank account or $6,000, like it's just what I have to do. And if I don't do it, then I'm not living my life the way I want to. And um, so I just have always ignored that, or always just said that's not the truth. You can do this. You can make this
That's
happen.
not the truth. That's so
Mm.
beautiful because we decide what the truth is. And it was so
Mm-hmm.
profound for me to like hear that. I mean, I keep going back to this, that your idols are telling you like this isn't a thing that happens anymore, and you decided a different truth. I've always been someone who like would listen to others before I would listen to myself for a really long time. I
Mm.
can say that
Mm.
that's safely in the past. Um, but it was a recent thing for me, and like I said, I'm 5 years older than you. I
Mm.
didn't necessarily have that. I had that like self that self-doubt, and I let other people decide what the truth was for me.
Mm.
And And I think that's so important. You get to decide what the truth is. And then I'm also thinking, like, I've been so obsessed with Jim Carrey lately. I don't know if you've seen this trip he's on, but he is he is on
Yeah,
his
absolutely.
journey.
It's amazing.
Okay.
It's wild.
So
It's
I
crazy.
mean, I love it. I'm super obsessed with him right now. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the video where, you know, these aren't the exact words, but he's talking about his dad and how his dad, you know, like lived a life that he just basically, it wasn't genuine to him, but it was the quote unquote like responsible thing to do. And he failed at it. He got fired at 50, right, from, I don't know, banking or something conventional like that. And what he had always wanted to do was something more in the creative industry. So like the way Jim sums it up is something like, you can fail at what you hate, so why not like take the gamble on what you actually love? And again, those aren't the exact words, and that's why I'm like, yeah, because you were saying, like, if you stopped this, if you decided that something else was the truth, you would not be living the life that you're supposed to live. And I've been down that path before, and the consequences are ugly. Like, they are not good at all. Like, for me, it was the anxiety, the depression, way too much drinking. It wasn't good at all, and it wasn't empowering. So I don't know, I just really like want to acknowledge you for just like creating your own truth. It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, I feel like that's one thing I really have to stop and think about, is like, that's always pushed me really far. And there are times when I've thought, like, oh, maybe I should listen to that other thing in my mind telling me to, but it's like I can't stop the real truth from happening. You know, it just, I have to follow those words and that feeling all the time. And I feel like it's really gotten me to a lot of really amazing places. It has. And I also really acknowledge the consequences that I have made in my life because of it.
And those consequences
And
being like, maybe like relationships not working out, or what are
sure,
you talking about?
that's a part of it. Definitely relationships. Not to say that I'll never be in a happy relationship ever again.
You
I
will
think I
be.
will be, but it's been really hard. It's also I've sort of become at peace with the fact that, like, being concerned with money and being really careful. I mean, I've realized that that's something that I'm always. I mean, I think I'm aware now of, like, what my life really looks like really looking at it, like I see it for, like, okay, that's what it's going to be. Like, I'm always kind of aware of, like, the kind of financial situation I'll always be in. And I feel like I'm just really aware of that. I feel like that's a consequence, you know, not a bad one. It's a really good one. Like, money is not something that drives me in my life. Like, I'm not, I'm concerned about it in the sense that, like, yeah, I've got to pay my bills and I've got to eat and I've got to be able to take care of myself and take care of other people. But, like, I'm okay with the situation I'm in. I'm okay with making it happen the way that I am, you know, like, I don't feel like I need to do something else in order to make those things happen. And I feel like that's a choice we make at a certain point. Because I have seen a lot of people that have been unbelievably talented and, like, I admired so much, and they just could not deal with the reality of this lifestyle, which I totally understand and I'm totally aware of. I just they just, at a certain point, I think it becomes too much. You know, and I've thought about that a lot. You know, even touring, like yeah, I live in New York City, but how often am I really here? Not that much. I'm always moving. I'm always traveling. I'm always in a hotel room. I'm always in these crazy places. But, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I'm aware of these choices. Maybe they're not consequences, they're choices. That's a better way to put it. But I'm aware of these choices that I'm making, and I see life for what it really is. And I guess I'm at peace with that. I'm okay with that. I know where it is. Sure, I'd like to have a family one day and kids, but like right now, like I know where I'm at. Like I see it and I feel it. I'm really there, and that's cool.
Right. That is
And
cool.
I think it's cool. Yeah.
For someone who like might be listening to this and is maybe they're in a 9 to 5, maybe they're sitting in a cubicle, but they have that thing inside of them that they're kind of neglecting because they might be scared of the consequences from certain choices. What would you
Yeah.
say to them if they're like kind of dying inside and they're waking up with like the dread in their pit of their stomach, like I was for so many years?
Hmm.
What would you say to them, the ones who are scared to like go after what they love because they're scared of the financial consequences and family consequences and all that?
I would say ask yourself what you really believe as to your life, and what makes you happy, and what really drives you creatively. And really ask yourself if it's something you really can do, and if it feels like there's things getting in the way of that, like how are you able to really let go of these things that might be holding you back, and how far can you really push it um, before it becomes impossible. And I think that the answer for me has been that nothing can really stop or get in the way of really being creative and really um, pushing myself in order to do that. And I would
Mm.
say that you just sometimes it feels really impossible, and sometimes it feels like it's too much, or it's just not within our reach. And I feel like the important thing to realize is that's okay.
Hmm.
um, at that moment. It's okay to feel that. But the question becomes like, how far are you willing to go, and how far are you really willing to try um, before it becomes too much? Um, and so I guess I would say I would just encourage people to push themselves even further out of their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. It's hard to say because I know that other side, that sort of, because I've been there, and I've really experienced it, and I've experienced depression, and sort of when those questions come up, I've really gone far with the doubting. Like I've really gone far, and I've had situations in my life where I've really pushed it really far. But something I realized is that like that need, I guess the realization of like living a life without being creative or playing music, it just really, couldn't do it. And so I guess the question becomes like, or I guess I would say to somebody like, maybe experiment with that. Maybe experiment with not having that creativity in your life, and really listen to how it makes you feel,
Mm-hmm.
and really be honest about that. Um, I don't know if that's good advice, but I guess that's all I can
I
really
think it's
feel at this.
amazing advice. No, that's
Okay,
absolutely
cool.
perfect. And one of the things that you said that I really want to emphasize is like it's okay, like in the moment, to have that doubt and to have those questions, but what's implied is that it's temporary. And what's implied with
Mm,
everything that you've shared with us is that it's temporary. And again, like this ability, this is really something that I want people to get from this, that we get to define our own truth. We're surrounded by
Mm.
so many people, social media, television, billboards. I'm in Las Vegas. I mean, it's masterful advertising around here. Same with New York City, that define the
Mm.
truth for us, like that define what makes us happy. And that's where I think things get really, really dangerous for some people, and we end up in prisons of our own making. But we get to
Yeah.
define the truth.
Right.
We get to reject whether a certain standard of living that causes us to like take a 9 to 5 out of fear so that we can, I don't know, go shopping at the luxury shops, at the Venetian. Not that there's anything wrong with
Mm.
that. You know what I mean? Like the consumption versus the creation. And again, like, I don't know, we get to define our truths, and you're living proof of that, like living, breathing proof. Like, I don't think I mentioned at the top of this, I think I've known you since you were in 6th grade, 7th grade or something like
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just like I've had this like vague notion of like, yeah, he's a musician and he's really successful and everything, but I knew that there was something deeper to it, because it just doesn't happen by accident. You've had to be really disciplined mentally, whether you realized you were doing it or not.
Mm. Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate hearing it's good advice, because it's yeah. I feel like it's what I know, but um yeah, I think you said it beautifully. Like, we really are the one that we are in control of our happiness, and we are in control of defining what our life really is.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's the really important thing, is just really, when I'm in those moments of doubt, like, I just really say to myself, like, remind myself, like, what do you do? What do you feel like you're here to do? What is I mean, people ask themselves all the time, like, what's your mission in life? And it can mean, I think what really brought me closer to realizing what mine is to really look at other people's lives and realize what they might be too. And really, following the lives of other people and seeing, how they got to where they are, and just the feeling of that, and admiring other people as well, and seeing where they're at. I feel like it gets me closer to where I am too. And just a constant reminder of that, I'm not saying I'm online and I listen to my music every day, or I listen to myself playing every day, but I listen to music itself every day, or I try to remind myself what the beauty of being a musician is. The beauty of being a musician is a constant state of creativity, and trying to. The reason why I love music is because you're never just there. You're never like the master. And that's it. You've got it. It's a constant climb. It's a constant climb uphill, and you're constantly working at it. There's a really amazing story about really famous musician Benny Goodman, who was a clarinet player in like I can't remember, 1930s, 1940s. It's a really inspiring story. The day he died, he woke up and he got his clarinet and he started practicing all of his scales. He played all of his scales, and he went back into bed and he laid down and he died. And like that to me is just a very incredible story. And that's something I remind myself of every day, is like, he was working. He was still working. And that's how I want to live my life. I want to keep working.
Till the day he died. And I think that's another really beautiful point. Not only do we define our own truth, but behind that also is some major discipline of doing the work. And I really love that you pointed out that there's no like, all right, you've mastered it, you've gotten it all figured out. I was listening to some podcast the other day, and they were saying that at some point scientists during the Enlightenment era like issued a statement saying we're about 2 weeks out from having it all figured out. I thought that was like so sweet, and like really like naively optimistic. I was like kind of
Right.
touched by it, but like when you tap into your purpose, that thing that you love so much, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be the thing that is a joy to continue to learn, because Benny Goodman was probably really masterful at every single scale that there ever
Mm.
was, but he still did the work. There's the work to
Right.
do, and I don't mean it in like a toiling chore kind of way. Like you alluded to this
Right.
before we like started recording. When I
Mm.
played music, practicing felt like a chore, and I would look at my
Mm.
brother and I could see it wasn't a chore. It was like it fed his freaking soul, and I was like, oh, I
Mm.
love music, but I'm not a musician, you know. And with
Mm.
coaching
Mm.
with coaching it's the same thing for me. Like just consuming books, watching Tony Robbins videos, just stuff like that. It
Mm.
just never ends, you know. Like the
Right.
work never ends. Like, how can I better serve someone today? How can I better serve myself today? How can I do the work on myself that so that I can show up for
Exactly.
my clients super powerfully today? Like the work is definitely always there, and I think that is an important thing beneath the romance of like the truth is what you make it. The truth is
Right.
also built on discipline and making the truth what you want it to be. That involves mental discipline, but in like kind of this like quick fix, like mind hack kind of world, all right, certain hacks are okay, I guess, but I wouldn't say like go out for something that you want some kind of shortcut to. It's not
Right.
going to
Right.
work.
Exactly. I think
No.
that's it. Absolutely. And finding the beauty within what it is that your work is, you know,
Yeah.
and constantly having a healthy relationship with it. You know, I think we always
Yeah.
there's moments where we become really frustrated with what we do and what our craft is, but there's always
Yes.
that drive and that motivation and inspiration, and just having a really healthy relationship with that and be able to really get in tune with that and really see it for what it is, you know. Um, that's something I really think about every time I perform or on my way to a performance. You know, I'm on the train going to a gig. Like I always find myself smiling and laughing and having joy about like, wow, I'm going to play music for people right now. That's what I want to be doing. That's
Mm,
great. Just constantly reminding
yeah.
yourself of that, you know.
The little moments of gratitude. Well, Colin, I think that's a really gorgeous place to wrap up. Is there
Awesome.
anything coming up for you that you'd like people to know about, or social media, anything like that?
Mm. Well, there's this thing called Instagram. I'm kind of figuring out and putting more sort of thoughts and creative things up there, um, at Colin Stranahan. It's kind of silly to promote that, but it's a cool way where it's a way I can promote shows and tours coming up, and also just thoughts and ideas I'm having. So I guess that's a cool place, a creative space, I guess, in our day and age that um, I feel pretty good about. And you can find some of my music there, and yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay. All right, everyone.
Cool.
If you enjoyed this talk, go ahead and follow Colin on Instagram at Colin Stranahan. I'll put the link in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening, Colin. Thank you so much for your time. This conversation was absolutely
Mm.
gorgeous.
Thank you very much, and thanks for doing what you do. It's really incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.